Got you in the front row.
Thank you all for coming. We'll go ahead and call this meeting of the State Route 89 Utility Project Citizens Committee to order at 5:30 p.m. All members of the committee are present, with the exception of Mike Evans, which will be absent tonight, and Scott Whitehead, the alternate, is present as well. Next item is the approval of minutes from the April 24th and April 29th meeting.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second. Bud has a motion to accept. Corey has seconded. Any discussion on the minutes or corrections? All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved for the last two meetings. We have no old business to cover. The new business for tonight is presentation and discussion on economic development organizations with a brief recap by Town Manager Robert Smith.
Thank
All
you.
yours.
Thank you, Gary. Before I get started, I wanted to recap what we went over at the last meeting, but I wanted to introduce to the folks here in the committee the people that we brought in for Q&A on economic development. At our last meeting, there were some economic development questions that came up, and we didn't have a whole lot of expertise in the room, so we thought we would reach out. And I just wanted to introduce the people that are here to have that conversation with the committee today. I've got Keith with the Arizona Commerce Authority. I've got Jim Rounds with Elliott Pollock's group. They do economic development consulting work. We've got John Kruger with APS. Tracy Shimikowski with the Chamber of Commerce. I've got Alexander White with Yavapai College. She's the Rural Development Director there. Our own Ruth Mayday from Planning. Steve Rutherford, who is a member of PVEDF and GPREP, which is the Regional Economic Development Organization, and Denise Steiger, she's running GPREP right now for all of us. So she's heading up the regional economic development effort. So we have from the top down, the guys at the states, regional infrastructure, the college, the local chamber, and our region, supported by both PVEDF and GPREP. So if we can't answer the question with all that, we're hopelessly over-challenged. I wanted to provide a brief synopsis of what we discovered before, what we discussed before, just for anybody else out there who may be here with us for the first time. And hopefully I can do this in 5 minutes or less. The reason why staff has proposed a general obligation bond is because the water and sewer utilities operate at a deficit, and they require money out of our general fund in order to break even. Even with the $80 sewer bills that are part of our rate structure, in I think 4 years we'll have those, we still are operating at a deficit because we don't have enough users in the systems to break it even. While it has been operating at a deficit, we've kind of kept track. We know it's over 1.4 million that is owed to the general fund at this point. The reason why it's important to keep track of that is we have 135 miles of roads that we have deferred maintenance on for 6 years now. And we are $8 million behind on pavement maintenance. And pretty soon we're going to be 135 miles out of 135 miles deferred. The surfaces that we use for our streets here only hold up for about 10 years. So we want to maintain them before they fall apart, because if you have to replace them, it costs more. So this is the situation that we're trying to solve. The way we came up with a solution for that is to propose 3 things. One is procurement of the Prescott water system. And if you look at these maps, Jan Macy made these for us. And I'm sorry you can't see it. Oh. It's over there. I'll give you another
You just get the picture.
The purple lines on this map is the Prescott water system that we're talking about buying. So you can see how much additional geographic area it adds to the town's services. Right now, our water system on this map is in blue. So we have water here and here, and a little bit here. But you can see how much more town area is covered by the purple lines. The red lines in here are interconnections or connections to the town system. The two purchases, the Prescott water system and these interconnects, is about $4 million. It's $4.1 million to buy that. The lines in orange on this map is our existing sewer system. We have about 1,800 users on our sewer system. These folks in Chino Meadows, I think, is this one? Chino Meadows 1. They are on the town sewer system and on Prescott's water system. They have the worst of both worlds. Prescott charges a higher rate than Chino charges, and then they charge a 30% out-of-city surcharge on top of that. These people here are enduring the worst of the worst. They have the super high water bill, and they have the sewer bills, and the rate increases are doing nothing but going up. So on this map, you can see the proposed water system acquisition, and these dashed lines right here, from 3 north to 2 north, is the economic development project, the installation of water and sewer up and down 89, where the bulk of our commerce is. And that's this map here. It shows you the parcel count, and a schematic attempt at routing the infrastructure through both sides of 89. So the staff came up with, why don't we buy the Prescott water system and add a bunch of users to the system to try and help it break even, and then we can lower their water bills by about 45% because they won't be paying the out-of-town rates to Prescott anymore. The second part of the GO bond that we talked about was settling the FAN wastewater treatment plant agreement. We have a construction manager at risk agreement with FAN contracting. They built the plant. And we owe them about $5 million. And it's going to take us about 11 years to pay them back, because the way we pay them back is through connection fees. So if you want sewer service, you pay the town the connection fee and you get connected, but we turn right around and give all of that over to pay off this contract. What that means is we don't have dollars piling up anywhere, that if the town wanted to extend sewer out to a business, let's say you had a business you were going to put up here and you needed water and sewer, and you came to the town and said, hey, I want to locate my business in your town and put 100 employees here, we would not have the money to extend this line. Under normal circumstances, the town would help this guy extend out here, and then as these properties began to develop and use the sewer system, the town gets paid back. But we don't have the money coming to us to do that, because we use it to pay for the construction of the plant. So the sewer system doesn't grow. There's no way to extend it. The third piece of this puzzle was getting these two utilities off the general fund doesn't generate enough money to take care of this. And the only way, since Chino Valley survives off of sales taxes, the only way to do that is to grow more businesses in Chino Valley. And if we had more businesses here and people spent more money here, there would be more tax income for the local government, and we could put that tax income towards the roads in our town. And so that's the reason why we proposed installing infrastructure between 3 North and 2 East, where the existing businesses are. So there were 2 ways to pay for this. One is revenue bonds and one is GO bonds, and it's important to know the difference. GO bonds are a property tax. Everyone in the town participates. Every property owner in town participates in the GO bond effort. Under the GO bond effort, with everybody participating, there's enough money to make the utilities grow so we can expand them and serve new businesses that come to town, and we can eliminate, at least for the next 4 or 5 years, all the rate increases on the water and sewer utilities. Revenue bonds are a different matter. Revenue bonds come from the cash flow within the utility. The only people that are participating in funding a revenue bond are the people who are connected to the utility. And when you take all of the cash flow out of the utility to fund these things, there's not enough cash to go around. You still have to have the rate increases. They're about $3 or $4 less, but you still have to have them. There's not enough money to put money back for capital expansion. You can't grow the systems. And only a few people in town, only the people connected to the systems participate in this solution. So when you look at the potential impact and the cost, and we have details for average cost per neighborhood and things like that, in general, for the more challenged neighborhoods, having a $4 or $5 a month tax bill versus having an additional $24 a month on your sewer bill is an attractive payoff. And these guys in this area have borne the weight of this system ever since it was installed. So that's kind of what we talked about and why the structure is the way it is. And we talked about the difference between the different kinds of bonds. And there's some details. I'm sure you can find your neighborhood in this chart and see what the average home in your neighborhood pays per year under this kind of a structure. We've got about a $13 million project we're proposing. Is that a pretty good summary?
And in addition to that, he says staff. This committee, at least part of it, we've had some replacements, recommended last year that the council go forward with this very issue. The difference is, and why we're reconsidering, another year has gone by, the funds are lower, but we have shrank the size of the project in '89. Last time we recommended it was for start at the north end and go as far south as you can get, which left it a little vague in some people's minds. So this one is a little more specific. Plus, we've added a whole lot more details. Last time we didn't look at the global picture. It was very focused on just the utility users. So when you say staff, it's been recommended by staff, it's been approved by this committee, and now staff has recommended a new plan, which this committee is now contemplating. So, yes, that's great.
So at this point, would it be okay for the committee to fire off questions and have our experts?
How much is it going to cost us,
How much is what going to cost?
this bond?
I think the total bond cost is, I'm sorry, I think the total bond cost is $13.1 million, is that right? Is it $13.5 million?
And how much are taxes going to be?
Does anybody have the stifle chart? Yes, sir.
It was $10.
$10,000 and $2,000.
Yeah, $10, 100,000.
I've actually got a chart here where we went through every neighborhood and we averaged out the assessed value of all the homes. And if you tell me what your neighborhood is, I can tell you what the annual, the monthly burden would be for you. So does anybody want to go first?
Appaloosa Meadows.
Which part of Appaloosa Meadows? Appaloosa Meadows Phase 1, your estimated monthly tax would be $14.76. Y'all want to hear Chino Meadows? Chino Meadows Unit 1, $2.79. Chino Meadows Unit 2, $3.27. Chino Meadows Unit 3, $5.96. Chino Meadows Unit 4, $4.26. Chino Meadows Unit 5, $5.33.
Robert, I have commercial property on 4 North. What's that going to cost?
That's going to be different. I learned from the stifle route that the state's law is imposed on us when we structure a bond. And as Mr. Mazie said at the last meeting, there is a higher commercial charge. And it's about twice, I think, what the residential, isn't it?
It's on the chart.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay, all right. Commercial estimates from Road 2 south to Center Street is $122 a month. Road 4 south to Road 2 south is $100.45 a month. They're all, the highest one is Road 2 north to Road 3 north, and that's because the valuation there, I think, is $218 a month.
What about Parkside Village?
Parkside Village. Here we go. Parkside Village amended, $11.34 a month.
So when you said residential versus commercial, it's much more than double.
It's more
It's
on the
almost 10
commercial.
times.
So it's 10 times.
It is more on the commercial.
Is this going to be figured off of your county tax?
It'll come to you in your county tax bill, yes, sir. And it's based on your your assessed tax values. Yes, ma'am.
When you're saying monthly now, you're giving us an average monthly cost?
Well, what they did, they looked at every house in the neighborhood, and they added up their assessed value and then divided it by the number of homes, and then they computed the monthly cost for the average home in that neighborhood.
Okay, so what about a street like Shelby Court? How did that come out?
Shelby Court. They're not all in alphabetical order. I don't see Shelby Court on this. Is there something similar to Shelby Court?
It's 19 homes on 20 acres.
The reason why we didn't do Shelby Court is we focused on subdivisions, and Shelby Court is a series of lot splits. So we didn't look at that
So
one.
much of this town is lot splits, so we don't have an estimate for lot splits.
Well, we could produce it, but we went through in the easiest way that we could.
Yeah, I understand why you would do it, but there are a lot of people on lot splits, so.
Yeah, all we're trying to do is just give an overall rough number for people, and this isn't average, so 50% are going to be
Okay.
above, 50% below.
Maybe you can explain the $10 per hundred assessed value, that she can get an idea from that.
Does that still hold the 10 per hundred? Yeah, the county tax folks provide you with an assessment, an assessed value for your home. And the payment, the calculation that this is based on is $10 a month per 100,000 of assessed value. So, you know, your assessed value and your sale value are very different. Your assessed values are usually lower. I can say this, in this chart where we went through all these neighborhoods, the highest one, the highest amount per month in the chart for our neighborhood is Fire Sky Ranch, and that's $18.99 a month.
Anybody can go on the county's website, look up your individual parcel, and look up your limited property value, and you can run the calculation yourself to find out exactly what it would be for your property. So,
I got it, thanks.
Any other questions? Thanks, Cole.
Thank you, Robert. I just want to get the information.
Sure. Anybody else?
Robert, you said that we're doing this to bring in new growth, correct? And yet, the proposed area you're putting it is because of existing businesses. You just said that a few minutes ago. So wouldn't it make more sense to put the system in if this bond is passed down along the hotel where we've got water and sewer, the Prescott water, but we have sewer going right to the highway?
So you're
And
talking
where there's a lot of
about,
growth area to bring in new growth?
you're talking about,
Down that area there, right? I
Down
don't know
here.
exactly where on that map, because I can't tell, but the sewer runs right down Fletcher Court, right to the hotel there, and then right above that is, I believe, Center Street, not Center Street, might be Center Street, where it comes right to the highway also. And there's a lot of room down there for new growth.
so the only thing down there now is
I
the
think there's a
bank
hotel in the bank. Yeah.
and a bank, but that's all there is down there.
Right.
Would any of our experts care to comment on that?
Give you the opinion that business likes the cluster. They don't like to be away from their competition. Their foot traffic generates foot traffic. If a new grocery store is going to come in, it's not going to want to be too far from your existing grocery store.
Well, it won't be too far. But I mean, the question also goes is, has anybody ever done any traffic counts in the town here to see where the traffic is actually flowing? Because years ago I took a marketing class and that was one of the major things for analysis as to where business is going to go is where the traffic flows. I mean, I know you look out in the morning and to Baldwin and back and forth.
I think the counts on 89 right now are about 23,000 trips a day
Where?
on 89.
Where? Road 1, Road 4 south, Road 4 north. What's the traffic counts in the different areas? I mean, that's my question, is, has anybody done this analysis?
ADOT doesn't do their traffic counts based off of mile per mile along 89. The 23,000 vehicles a day is at 4 south, is where they happen to take those traffic counts at, and they take them annually down in that area. We take traffic counts annually also. The 2 highest streets that we have in traffic volumes, you want to guess? Road 3 north is the highest, 2 north. So for the town's east-west traffic, is between 2 north and 3 north, which is comparable to the area that we're proposing. Those are the 2 single highest streets that we have in traffic count, and we do count them annually. Yes.
Now, those are on the streets of 2 north and 3 north, correct?
But you still have 20,000+ vehicles a day along 89.
No, my question is, if you got 23,000 vehicles a day at 4 south, and then, yes, I understand because I live out that way, that the traffic flows down to 2 north coming from out the Bright Star area, and comes from 3 south from out in the county out here, coming by, and because those are your main arteries. But at the same time, when you have the 23,000 vehicles, when they get to 2 north of the ones traveling down 89, how many are left? You don't know?
No,
I mean, don't.
No, we do know. I mean, we have traffic volumes. We don't have traffic volumes mile by mile in Chino Valley.
Yeah.
Since Chino Valley has the 2 highest streets, 2 north and 3 north,
Right.
it stands to reason that the large proportion of those 23,000 vehicles are coming from the 2 highest streets that Chino Valley has. Now, in addition, you also have Paulden up to the north. So the bottom line is that we know that 89 has, in the area between 2 north and 3 north, in excess of 20,000 vehicles a day. We know that 3 north and 2 north are the highest east-west roads feeding traffic to 89. Does that make sense?
Okay.
When this goes to bond, is this specific on where we're going to expand the sewer, or could it be just listed as for sewer and water expansion?
I think the council's going to want to specify where this water and sewer expansion would be. And I think that they will come forward and say, you know, this is the project area that will.
Versus collecting the money, putting it in the bank, and then see what develops. And if we get a large commercial outfit want to come in, well, then we could accommodate them at that point, instead of saying, well, here it is, and we're stuck with that mile. Just a question.
And that was the comment I made when this committee met last time. That was the hang-up, is that we identified projects all the way through, and that was too vague. It was too much to put your head around. So if you don't identify it, that's where the problem came in. And it's going to be the same thing when council gets it, then they're going to have to rustle it all over again to figure out. So, yeah. So that's why we kind of stay away from that, try to identify a particular project. So that there was at least a known of that, especially when it goes to bond, because the bond is written for, this is what the money's for, and this is what it's going to do.
Robert.
Carrie.
Since we've brought all these people in, I would like to really go forward on our discussion that we started last week. What Scott brought up about what you just said, making them all together compared to spread out, because that was my argument last time, was I'd rather have it where we can actually grow. But then what Scott was explaining last week made a lot of sense to me, but I would really like to expound on that, maybe with the expertise of why do we want them all right here and then move them slowly but surely as we grow.
Well, one other thing, am I incorrect, but once we assume the water parcels, the Fletcher Court area won't have a problem of development. The water won't cost them a fortune to get hooked up to as the auto parts store did. Is that correct?
I don't believe it'll be necessary for them to continue to operate a private water system.
That's right. That's what I'm saying, yes. So it will grow.
perspective, you want to have a comprehensive plan, and you want to focus on your existing users from a utility perspective for your rate base now, not only to help them with their current rates, but also to help the infill parcels be able to get connected, also be able to have a favorable insurance rating for fire sprinkler suppression. But that's also going to drive homes. And so it starts to feed on itself, because the home buyers like to see that there's the retail amenities and so forth that they can go shop at. And once there's homes and there's retail, then it starts the snowball effect. You've already got a good base of that. Then secondarily, employers want to see that you've got a labor force to pull from in the immediate area, as well as amenities for the employees to go to for various goods and services. And so I think what Robert and staff have proposed here is the best all-encompassing plan. We've seen in other communities around the state that do just that they'll build a road out to a certain area because that's where their general plan projects the road. And next thing you know, the economic cycle takes a downturn, and now you got nothing, and you got to pay the debt on it. And so, start with what you got and grow outward that you can build upon. That's in my opinion, after 25 years of doing this stuff.
And Keith, the retention factor in economic development is huge as well. It's not all about attraction, it's about keeping what you already have. That's a cost-effective way to maintain your tax base, your revenue base.
Yeah, you don't want to lose your current standing or position now and go backwards and regress. You want to keep what you have now and go forward. And so if there's punitive bills, utility bills for some residents, et cetera, then all of a sudden you have folks trying to leave, and there goes your labor base, there goes your property values for those types of houses and that sort of thing. So you don't want to create that snowball, but rather you want to get it going in the other direction.
Jim had some time to work on some analysis for us over the last couple of days. And it would be helpful, I think, if he was able to share some of the findings that he made. You guys should have copies of that document. It's also available to the public here on the table.
We spent a lot of time with Robert on the phone, and he gave us about an hour and a half presentation. And I have to say it was probably the best technical presentation by a town or city manager that we've ever received. He put a lot of thought into it. In fact, he doesn't know this, and I told my colleague who was working on it, we said, wow. So for what it's worth, I know that a lot of thought went into doing this in an economically efficient way. But I actually think that question from earlier is perfect. That's one of the first things that you think about. You have limited resources. The whole state has limited resources. You have to maximize your opportunities. So you want to build and expand infrastructure in an efficient way. And if you can get economies of scale in certain areas, that's great. The types of businesses that you want to try to recruit are going to be those base sector companies, like the manufacturing companies, and those where they can locate in other communities, and then they'll bring the retail with it. You don't necessarily need to incentivize some of the retail unless you have some micro issues with leakage or something like that. You can analyze that and figure out if you're underproducing in terms of providing certain services, the more retail, local market oriented ones. So the traffic volumes are important for retail operations. Having the infrastructure is going to be important for the target companies that you should be going after. One thing, and this has been my pet peeve the last few months, and we're going to continue talking about this, a lot of communities in Arizona are horribly behind in terms of their local infrastructure. Now, there's going to be a lot of reform at the state level. ADOT's going to be looking at the potential of trying to figure out how to fund major improvements over the next couple of decades, because we're at the point where you're filling potholes at this point. We're working on a big study for ACA that's going to be addressing some of these issues. It's going to try to identify if the additional businesses coming in are going to cover some of these costs. But my bigger concern is at the community level. So we went through this boom period, and you saw some communities expand a little too much because they were thinking the population was going to continue flowing into their areas. Now all of a sudden, population growth stalled, and they're still funding fire departments that are way in the middle of nowhere where there's not going to be development for some time. Their budgets are way out of whack. You don't have that in this region. There's still a lot of good opportunities here. But we're seeing this across the state. This could be one way of getting a leg up on some of the other communities during this particular business cycle. But keep in mind, be very, very careful with the investment, because I'm at the point where I don't think this is going to be an economic expansion that includes a boom. Every other expansion that we've ever had has gone through a boom period. We're going to continue to improve. Hopefully, we'll continue to improve, and you'll see improved numbers in terms of your tax collections and ability to make investments. And we might go through a little bit of a slowdown period, and we'll be going through the next business cycle, which might look a little bit more normal. But this plan also includes components of that, because if you were just funding it based on the new businesses coming in and new tax activity, it might be a little bit difficult to make things pencil out early on. Now, I'm in favor of government being as small as possible, but you have to tax and you have to provide services. There's a balance. Usually that gets left out as a discussion. And in this case, when we reviewed each of these components, that Robert, honestly, he could go through this for another hour and a half, and it would be pretty interesting going through the details. It followed best practices pretty closely. The one thing that we recommend that you might want to consider, though, is that the discussion has been wholly based on the property tax, and I think that's how you might have to do this. But you haven't factored in the new business locations that hopefully are going to come in. Now, it's not going to come in because you put in infrastructure. It's going to come in because you put in infrastructure and you do economic development well. You work with these businesses closely. You have a good relationship with the Commerce Authority and the economic development organizations that are looking at this region more broadly is going to be effective, so you can advertise the broader workforce. You're going to have to advertise that it's a great place to live so you can still recruit workers. We've got a dozen things that companies are going to look at, but this is one of the core foundational ones, the infrastructure. But you can figure out what the fiscal impact would be of some new business location examples in small increments. And then you have to say, do we think that everything is set up where enough new businesses can come in and it's going to generate a certain amount of revenue? Now, it's possible. Now, what you do with that revenue would be your choice. You have to first have everybody buy into, we think that this community is well positioned to bring in some additional businesses. You can do the math on figuring out what the tax revenues are going to be from the new businesses, and that includes the additional spin-off retail. And then that could maybe later be used to partly pay for some of this. It can be used to pay for additional infrastructure down the road, so you don't have to have additional taxes, or maybe they can be modified later, where the town gets a return for its investment. And so that's how I would look at it. This is how we look at it from the state level all the way down to the smallest of communities. Are you going to be getting a return on your investment? You have to put in basic things because of safety, and there has to be a reasonable amount of travel time. You don't want people spending an hour getting from one side of town to the other. That would be stupid. That would make no sense. But then you get into the economics. So with the numbers that would be produced, if all of this stuff comes together, it would produce a certain amount of revenue. You buy into those numbers. And if you do, then I think that you also discuss that with the residents of the community so they understand that they're also benefiting from new job opportunities and additional revenue and additional community investment. So think holistically about it, but those are the questions that should come up. You have to be very cost effective right now because it's not like everybody's awash in cash.
So with step number one, having more of a commercial, not a commercial base, a manufacturing base first, and then retail will follow. Did I hear that correct?
Yeah, yes and no. When you deal with these micro-analyses and you have these connected communities, right now you may be providing enough retail opportunities for residents and you don't have leakage. You might be absorbing some activity from outside the area. You have to figure that out first, because then you have to just convey additional information to the potential retailer. Sometimes a grocery store will wait until you hit a certain threshold in terms of population before they'll build. You don't just incentivize retail. Not everybody in a community can work at McDonald's. You have to be making stuff. That stuff has to go out of the community. The money comes into the community because unfortunately a lot of what we buy isn't made here. The last car you bought wasn't made in Chino Valley. Think about all the other stuff you bought, it wasn't made here. So you have to make stuff yourself that brings money in. So that's the critical aspect. That's where some of these industrial parks, where they can be efficiently constructed, you have the right utilities, and you have maybe a decade or 2 decade vision in terms of doing this. And when you're dealing with government investment and bonding, you're dealing with these longer periods. Can you enhance that? and then the retail opportunities willingly follow. So there are unique examples where a community is underrepresented, but in general, that's just how the economy works.
If I could build on that, I believe what you have here now in terms of a retail base is probably enough to sustain what exists today. If you want to grow that, the way to do that is to get the base industry first, to build upon the existing retail base. There's an old saying in our business, and my colleagues are going to get tired of me saying this, but having a Walmart store will not get you an Intel plant, but an Intel plant will get you a Walmart store plus. So, that's the way, and that's why the Arizona Commerce Authority and my colleagues at GPREP and APS and others pursue base industry, because that's the mechanism or the industry segment that's going to raise the bar for everything else to follow.
So amongst the professionals here, do you see Chino Valley as having a desirable workforce in town? I'm going to say kind of yes, because I see everybody going south in the morning and coming back to the north in the evening.
You just answered. Absolutely they do. You do. Chino Valley is on the cusp, as well as the entire Crescent region, but Chino Valley is particularly well positioned because you've got the available land and the population base to get things started. And you've also got land to build future homes when that demand becomes present. So Chino Valley is extremely well positioned. The one thing that's common among every rural community, at least in Arizona and probably even the country, is that infrastructure is the ubiquitous weak point. There's never enough money for infrastructure, especially in rural areas. And so to that end, I believe what Robert and the staff have put together is an extremely creative and comprehensive approach to it, which I'm thrilled to see, which is part of the reason why a lot of us have come out tonight, because we believe in what you've done here. So many communities try to survive on grants and essentially free money to get these things going. And what happens is they'll get one grant and they'll fund a study, and then it'll be another year or two to get another grant to advance that study. But in the meantime, the study, now the scope needs to be changed or it's out of date, and you just chase your tail. And so you've got to invest in yourselves, much like for the business folks in the room, getting a business loan to expand your business. At some point, you're going to retire that debt, but you need that extra infusion of capital to grow. And so, again, I think this is a very comprehensive approach. The other part of that is, and I've seen this in other communities with regard to infrastructure, is the timing is key. Because you want to start this infrastructure investment as soon as possible, because you never know what the economic cycles are going to do. And so many communities wait for a boom, and because they say, well, growth's going to pay for itself. Well, sure, growth's going to pay for itself, but once the boom has hit you, it's too late because of the length of time it takes to engineer and construct the infrastructure, much less finance it. So you want to be investing in that now while you've got time, and the economic cycle will come to you as it ebbs and flows through its natural process. I see that you're obviously engaged in wanting to create future opportunities for yourself in terms of economic development, retail growth. As Jim alluded to, it's got to be a comprehensive approach. A lot of communities put the cart before the horse and they get after the economic development stuff, and they've got just incredible enthusiasm, but their product is lacking in terms of the infrastructure. And so I'm thrilled to see the enthusiasm and the initiative that you as a community have put forth here on both fronts, the economic development front as well as the infrastructure front. And I can speak firsthand for the infrastructure, or excuse me, the economic development efforts with the enthusiasm of not only your city manager, Robert, but also Ruth Mayday, who's really takes her job to heart.
And keep in mind, so opportunities are gonna come, and towns hate to hear this, but there's a lot of other towns that will just like you. And you have to demonstrate an additional value. I'm sorry, that's just how it works. And I think that some of the value can be, you're doing your economic development planning in a more methodical way than I've seen with some other communities, and you're thinking about this infrastructure at a time where hardly anybody's looking at this infrastructure. I don't know if you've seen one of my presentations, but I do a lot of them throughout the year. Everyone so far this year has been hammering infrastructure, and so far not that many people are getting excited about it. And there's going to be a lot of communities that are not going to be positioned to take advantage of this growth, but they've been warned. I think that things are kind of coming together in an efficient way, but some of the companies that are going to be looking to locate here, I think are going to also move quickly. They're not going to want to sit through a long process, but they might be looking at an alternative location where they could move more quickly. So having some of this infrastructure in place and the ability to move quickly and, dig up some of that dirt early on, and Keith will, attest to this because he's seen this happen over and over again. Everybody says shovel-ready sites, but having the ability to move quickly as these opportunities come up, I think are going to be critical. And you will see a critical mass achieved. It may not be in the next 3 or 4 years, but you have to start small and then keep improving. State's economic development efforts, it's not like it's changing the economic numbers all that much in year 1 or year 2. The size of the state is just too large, but you do all this work for a decade, all of a sudden you actually notice it in the economic numbers. I think that could be relevant here. But I think the thing that we talked about a couple of months ago when we were up here, talking about the different communities getting together to promote the economics in the region, it sounds like there's some good opportunities in terms of advertising workforce right here. But to get a bigger company that maybe isn't as familiar with the region to locate here, you'll have to advertise the workforce in the broader area and the appealing attributes of the community so that they feel like they can recruit some of the businesses as well. And I know that's what these other groups are looking at as well. So I've seen these communities where they're doing it haphazardly, they're doing it poorly. Everything's kind of coming together a little bit for your region. And if it wasn't, I wouldn't say that.
Let me just add one more thing and then I'll shut up. The competition for these base industry projects and great jobs is extremely strong. And not just in Arizona, among communities in Arizona, but around the nation. Every community, and I'll speak for Arizona, every rural community here, even in the urban areas, they have that. But very few of them have infrastructure. And so that's going to be the defining factor that sets you apart from your competition.
The idea was brought up from Scott and here as far as business likes to stay close to business and grow out from that. Does manufacturing, are those people, does that appeal to them as well? Or is the manufacturing, do they really care where they put a plant?
Well, to some degree it helps if you've got some existing manufacturing companies, because what it tells people is that this business looked there and they found something that they like. Maybe I need to take a look too. And it's very hard to get companies to invest in a project or invest in an area where they're going to be a pioneer. Nobody wants to be the first. There's a theory in the site selection arena. It's called McDonald's theory of location. Where a McDonald's goes, a Burger King goes. Because Burger King figures McDonald's must know something we don't, so we better get there. Once Burger King goes in, Taco Bell goes in. Because Taco Bell says, geez, the demographics must be right for the consumers. It's the same consumer makeup, except now we're going to offer a different product offering. And so when Taco Bell goes, KFC goes. Same thing. So now we got chicken, tacos, burger. So it starts to feed on itself. And in many respects, in some of the manufacturing industries, they do like to cluster with each other because they can share suppliers, they can share freight loads, they can share training curriculums with one another, train tranches of new employees together to share the cost and that kind of thing. And so once you get the first one, the second, third, and fourth, become easier. But getting that first one is tough.
Keith, in my experience in the private sector, in trying to locate businesses into my properties, one of the things I hear from them is, give me the profile of businesses that exist within a 5-minute radius, 5-minute driving time of the facility you want me to go into. They want to see childcare, they want to see drive-in, they want to see grocery store, they want to see food. All the things that their people need to get on the way to work, and on the way home to work, and within their 30-minute or 60-minute lunch hour. I've heard that time and time again.
Well,
Give me the profile of what's surrounding the facility you want to locate.
It's true. Companies are in the business of providing whatever their product or service is. They're not in the business of providing daycare for the employees' kids or, having a cafeteria. And they're also not in the business of building infrastructure. They want to build widgets, and time is money for them. They got to get the product out to market. And so the more shovel-ready a site is, the quicker they can do that. And again, if you've got sites that have that infrastructure, you're that much ahead of the game.
Well, Steve, as you know, when a request comes in from companies, one of the first things that they ask you to list is all of your infrastructure that you have on that site. And that's one of the key things that can take you out of the running even before you get to the gate, so to speak. So that infrastructure is a key component to having even the sites like yours to first consider you for their facility.
Let me talk a little bit about that. That's a great point, Denise, and I want John Kruger here in this too. In the site selection business, when companies look for a new location to put a facility, it's all done on a spreadsheet by somebody in Ohio or New Jersey or Chicago. And they don't know where Chino Valley is. They hardly know where Arizona is in most cases, but we're trying to change it. So, when they send out that request, typically to like the State Economic Development Organization like us, we send it out to the communities. And we ask the communities to submit their best properties. And if you don't have all those line items filled in, you're eliminated. So this becomes the game of elimination. Because remember, they're going to get down to one location, and they're looking at probably the 4 or 5 western states, and then a variety of communities and regions within those western states. And so it's the game of not being eliminated for those of us on this side of the table. And again, you want to be able to say that you've got all of those aspects of a piece of property that will work. John, do you have anything you want to add to that? John Kruger with APS has been in this arena for 15 or so years. So,
well, I think the biggest challenge for you, I think, is staying on the list. The game for site selection consultants is absolutely, and even when we say site selection, they don't all have them. Some do it themselves. Some drive around, they find places that they like and see if it works. But even when a company has decided to drive around, find places they really like, find sites within those communities they think are nice, they're still going to put that list together of everything that's there at that site. And the minute they have one of those things in their mind, unless they just absolutely find some place where they're willing to go extra time, extra cost to try to figure out how to make that one site place work, they're gone. The instant something doesn't work, it's just off the list. Just because it makes it easier. I mean, we do the same thing when we go shopping for anything that we want, whether it's food, whether it's something you need for your house or your business. You go through and you say, well, there's 10 brands. I just don't like those. They don't meet my 80% of my needs. And these two, this one's best. And you immediately get down to that. That one solves all of my problems, and that's the one that you choose. And I truly think we have a lot of communities in Arizona, and NPS service territory that we're working with, that are looking at infrastructure challenges that they have, whether it's power or it's water and wastewater or it's roads. But I think, one of the things that struck me when I first started talking about this project with you guys was that you're solving multiple issues at once. You're not just looking at, I need water and wastewater, how am I going to fund water and wastewater? You're also looking at residential infrastructure. You're also looking at putting together a cohesive city plan for long-term infrastructure growth. It's not just solving an immediate need of, I need water, wastewater over here, and I'm finished. It is, how do I provide a system that is going to be able to grow itself over time, knowing that the system I have now can't grow at all. There's no mechanism for growth built into this. How do we find a way to be able to put in this now? Yes, that's what all this addresses. But this is creating a system so that we will be able to grow, and every additional client that we have, whether it's an attraction, or I'll tell you it's just as important to do your retention and your local expansion efforts. When you do that retention and expansion efforts, you're going to want to say, if you live here, you know darn well where you're not going to get service. You know darn well where you're not going to move immediately because you spend all your time here. You want to create an environment where you know this community will continue to grow. You're going to put your business here because the community has decided they want to grow. First and foremost, they create a system that will grow with you. If you're not going to grow, and even if you love, you're going to look around the state of Arizona and other states and find a nice place for you to raise a family, have your business, work, that is going to have already made the decision that they want to grow with you, and put this infrastructure in place ahead so that you can look at this as a town that will grow, you can grow, everyone will be successful, not just now, but the next 30 years. That's an important piece, because you site selection consultants, they'll just knock you off straight if you don't have it. Boom, you're done. And that's pretty easy. The rest of the challenging piece is your local retention and expansion growth.
You know, John mentioned one thing that spurred thought. You've got this unique opportunity here to do all of this infrastructure at the same time, and you also have the opportunity to put in an extra conduit for broadband. If you don't have broadband connectivity, you're going to be off the list for a lot of projects. And I'm sure all the residents that are going to have this new enhanced water and sewer service would appreciate having broadband service too.
And I want to put on my private sector hat for just a minute and talk about the next step, and John made a very good point. The first step is infrastructure. The next step is facilities, properties. If you don't have properties, facilities, vertical improvements, buildings that people can feel, touch, look at, yes, this will work, then you're probably off the list. Probably. Not every time, but most of the time, you're off the list. And this is like deja vu again and again and again for me. In my private sector job, I develop industrial real estate and land. And I work closely with the town of Prescott Valley in developing properties that have attracted significant business opportunities to the town of Prescott Valley. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, when we were getting our infrastructure in place, and we were able to do that through a rural housing grant. But the business community at that time, including myself, I was heavily involved in it in those days. There was a saying around town, and the saying was, stand back, boys, the fuse has been lit. And we all know what happened in Prescott Valley. And I see this opportunity here, and it's staring me in the face, and it's staring all of you in the face, and I cannot stress it enough. Light the fuse. Give it the opportunity to go. You'll get, when the town started putting infrastructure, it went to mostly to residential areas. I wanted to start developing an industrial area to create jobs in Prescott Valley. I went to the town and said, you put in the infrastructure, I will commit to building the buildings. If I bring in X number of jobs or X amount of capital investment, I'll pay you back for the infrastructure. If it doesn't work, no, nothing lost. The town did, and the town went, and we've done that numerous times in the town of Prescott Valley. Ruth has been on some of those the last decade or so. It has paid off hugely for Prescott Valley. Hasn't hurt me in the process either. But I can tell you unequivocally that Lockheed Martin would not be in Prescott Valley, Arizona if the town had not put in infrastructure and if I had not built the building. We have 200 jobs at $20 million payroll. Do the math. These are $100,000 a year jobs in Prescott Valley, Arizona. Why? Because there was an existing facility. If that facility wasn't there, our final competition was San Diego. We beat up Scottsdale, San Diego, and Prescott Valley were the final three. We got them because we could perform on a cost-effective basis because of this partnership with the town. And I think those opportunities, Chino has opportunities Prescott Valley would have killed to have back in those days. And one of those opportunities is Old Home Land. And this project brings infrastructure that much closer to Old Home Land. You guys have an asset here that most municipalities around the state have their left arm for. It is huge. And if we can get infrastructure out there, we'll attract partners who will work with the town and attract businesses. Been there, done it, seen it, seen it, seen it. It's staring us all in the face. We need to see that, and somehow this needs to be sold in the town of Chino Valley. This is a huge hinge pin, in my opinion, on the future of Chino Valley.
I see you nodding your head, but we're gonna have a limited amount of money to spend. Do we spend the money on Old Home Manor, getting the sewer and infrastructure out there where we could go industrial? Because I remember Prescott Valley early on, Betterbilt was one of the first big employers out there in Prescott Valley, and it took off. Or do we go and put it on our corridor for retail?
I think you put it on your corridor as the way staff's laid it out now, because we don't want staff as an alternative clinic for Old Home
I agree with that. You got to put the backbone in first.
If I can,
Put the backbone in first.
We talked about the grants and stuff.
Yeah.
They were trying to work on
Yes.
that.
I hear what you're saying, what's the priority here, and where's the best dollars spent?
And that's also why I asked earlier, is on this bond, whether this is something we could put this money in the election is gonna happen in November either way. If we could put that money in the bank, if we don't get our grants, do we need to go that way? Or,
It just so happens that the work, the infrastructure work that we are trying to create with Unisource in routing natural gas from 89 back into Old Home Manor, if we can put that project together, that will provide us with the match that we need for the EDA grant, which is the large pot funds. I can't duplicate that on 89. I have a unique set of circumstances at Old Home Manor that makes me a perfect fit for an EDA program. And so that's why we steered in that direction. So I think the best way for the town to get the most resources for the needs that it has as a whole is to go and look for EDA funds and matching funds for Old Home Manor, and look for the bond funds for the retail and commercial that would serve the entire community. I think that's a more winning approach. It puts more dollars on the ground for us.
so you're feeling pretty confident that we're gonna get some grants to go forward out there. It's just what's on the line here that I have to watch out for is our citizens in this town. It's not the town borrowing the money this time. If the town defaults, the town goes bankrupt. This time, it's the homeowners in this town that's gonna put their neck on the line. So I definitely want to bring up every possible, scenario, so we're into this eyes wide open. And that's why, I didn't even put you on the spot with a commercial, what's it gonna cost them per month? Okay, that's sweet that it's only $4 a month over the Meadows, but let's open up the whole book here.
Well, I think your questions are very fair and very warranted, but I think Robert really hit on really the hot point here, is if another large retailer were to come into town, he couldn't extend the infrastructure to get to them. And they're not going to just pay for it because they're good people. They've got bosses and boards of directors and shareholders also. And so then you'll have a void if you just go straight to the industrial. Sure, you might start getting some industrial, but then you're still going to have this patchwork of infrastructure that you've got to somehow piece together, by the way, pay off this past debt in order to advance the retail sector. So again, I think what staff has put together here is very well thought out.
And we took the EDA's request that we come back with a larger project as a sign of encouragement. We are talking to the ACA about their rural funds as well. We are pretty confident that we can come up with a deal with Unisource that will allow a gas line to go through there, and that be the local match, and maybe we do some ditch work as in kind. Our goal is to, as John was telling you, come up with a holistic solution that addresses a lot of problems, not just one solution. And we worked pretty hard to try and come up with the best recipe that we could, given the resources that we have at hand.
That rural grant, Keith, as you guys know, that wasn't funded this time around, but that's one of the boards that I sit on is Rural Business Development Advisory Council. We advise ACA on rural issues, exactly what we're dealing with. And that pot of money, I think is going to go up.
We have $1 million to it.
Going to go from $2 to $3 million. But I think that's a matter of timing, and I can't, actually, I'm the Avatar County representative. I can advocate for a project, but I don't get to vote on it. That's a conflict. But I certainly advocate for Chino Valley, the old home manor project is huge. But in my opinion, and that's all this is, in my opinion, but I feel very strongly about it, that as the EDA money starts to flow, and I think it will, I sit on that board as well, with EDC that submits that on behalf of you guys, I think that the ACA money will come. It takes time. The stars have to align. One of the projects we funded this last round, third or fourth go around,
Yeah.
I forget, several times, you know, they submitted before the stars aligned for them. So don't give up hope. There is money for industrial-based job infrastructure. It's there. Stay in the barrel, keep submitting, keep swinging the bat, stay at the plate, and it will come. These jobs are important. It will come.
If you guys had cut us a check, we would have been able to spend it anyway. So,
The other thing I'd say about the industrial versus retail at this point, normally, I advocate for the industrial infrastructure every time. Because what happens when you have the jobs that are the base economic sectors, they create the demographics the retail need to have to come in. In this case, and I took a good look at Old Home Manor and putting industrial and putting infrastructure out there versus putting infrastructure out here that would be mostly retail along your main corridor. If you decide to put the infrastructure in a place where you create the jobs in the base economic sectors, and then you can't immediately follow up with a place to put the retail, all the retail goes someplace else, and you'll never be able to capture that retail dollar again, because they've gone someplace else. You look at someplace like Thomas desperately chasing retail amenities because they're the only place in the metropolitan Phoenix that has more workforce employed in their town than living in their town, and no way to capture a dollar from it. So meaning they created a lot of jobs, but they have no place to actually, as a community, capture the money that those jobs generate in their community. Because they've actually just filled up with all, so it's slightly different than what you're looking at here. But if you put all these in, you find all the jobs, you get them all out there, you have great jobs, and then your retail goes, okay, you give me the demographics, you now have the demographics for me to go in and put my store, where am I going to put it? And you're like, oh, well, we're going to put it here, we just need a new set of keys to be able to put in the whatever wastewater. We'll go, oh, okay, well, you know what, they're all driving that way anyways, I'll just put it in here, all the infrastructure's in, and they'll put the retail in there, and you'll never be able to capture that again. So that would be the challenge on how to put these in order. It's still, it's a bit of chicken and the egg, but in this
So at
case.
this point, it does appear that we are going to be able to do both at one time, one through the GO bond and the other through a grant.
That's
what we're working hard for.
Well, maybe even more. Go ahead.
If you look at this map, this is 89, of course, up in the wall, as it always is. All of this here is commercial and industrial zone property. So this is 89, these red and these purple are commercially and industrial zone properties. So even doing this and getting the Prescott water system is going to stimulate some activity all over, not just out in Old Home Manor. We do have properties available, we just don't have water. Or you can pay $50,000 per sinking toilet.
We put the water in the sewer. That's what there is to it, it'll generate dollar bills.
Well, think about the discussion that you just had. You can put in all the infrastructure you want to try to induce retail. You're not going to have any retail unless there's more income in the community. It doesn't matter unless you promote retail if there's no income in the community. So if you can efficiently, and this is what we noticed with the plan, this is why we even said, what we're talking about. Actually, you don't want to tell people that, while you're on the phone with them, so they get a bigger ego. There's a meeting. But the plan seemed efficient, but, and also, on what was discussed earlier, when you're talking about a business locating in a community in this region, they're not gonna say, I'm not gonna locate in your area if it's here versus 5 miles down the road or whatever it is. Part of this is gonna be supply driven on where you put the infrastructure. If you can only afford so much in infrastructure, you put it in a particular area and those businesses are gonna group there. Now, in general, businesses like to group in a particular region because their suppliers, everybody else is located nearby. Within a couple of 3 miles, it doesn't matter, but if you have an efficient plan to put in the infrastructure for the business side, and then you have these additional grant monies that can go in to help support the retail that will only follow the activity, it won't lead the activity, and then, which you haven't even looked at, you have a single number for this, so this is good. The additional revenues that the businesses will generate can go towards supplementing some additional community growth. And so right now, the way we're seeing it is you have a plan that pencils out for you, and you haven't even considered one of the biggest components in terms of the additional revenue to the community yet. You don't see that too often. And so just consider that as the way the development occurs. It doesn't matter what you put in. It's ideally you'd like to have retail in a particular area and industrial in a particular area. There's a little bit of a mix, that's fine. But you have to have huge economies of scale from your infrastructure right now because you're kind of turning the corner in terms of how your community's been growing. It hasn't really excelled like it could have in the past. This will be a little bit different this time around, hopefully, with work from ACA and everybody else in the state. Keep in mind, just 3 or 4 years ago, we did a study that ranked Arizona as 50th in terms of economic development programs. We've come pretty far in a pretty short time. Now, a lot of people argue a lot of that's in the greater Phoenix area. It's statewide. A healthy Phoenix area also helps this region, but this region is locating base sector companies as well. I mean, look at the example that was just discussed. Well, why was it there? Because there was infrastructure and there was an ability to move quickly. But you also don't want to get too far ahead in what you put in the ground because you don't want to have money sitting in the ground that's not being used. And that's why you have to have a detailed plan.
Gary, there's one thing that we haven't talked much about, and that's our economic market. Chino Valley is about 11,000 people, 10,817 according to the census. But we know that there's some 18,000 or so people that live around us that come in or through our community to shop. And with that large a number of people surrounding us, we're fairly certain that they would spend more money here if there were more opportunities for them to spend the money. And I think one of the things that my college has done in CTEC at the airport is provide kind of a state-of-the-art facility. So if we did bring in a business here that needed people trained, and there's more resources than the Alpine College does, NACOG does that too, but the CTEC facility is only 5 miles away from Chino Valley. And it's a multi-million-dollar facility that's one of the best I've ever seen. And they could train people to do anything there. So knowing that we could support the needs of the businesses that come here with training and workforce, on top of knowing that we have this large population around us that could be employed. The employment rates here are pretty insane. And then knowing that we would have the opportunity to get the infrastructure in the ground, create the shovel-ready dirt, and actually have it. The pricing for the town owning the shovel-ready dirt is amazing. Right? We can compete with anyone in the country on shovel-ready dirt if we can get the infrastructure there. So there's this giant mix of circumstances around us that all spell success. We just have to find out if our community wants to take this step. That's where we stand today, and that's why when the committee last year said, infrastructure on 89 is great and all, but there are these other problems we need to resolve. That's the reason why we have this mix now. It's a little more complicated, but we get a heck of a lot more out of the 13 million than we were going to get last year. Alex, did you want to talk any about CTEC and what's been going on there?
Sure. As to echo what Mr. Smith just mentioned, really look at your factors of production and you're talking about labor capital, and we see we have technology and some diagnostics there too. But really, most rural communities, as has been stated over and over again, you're missing the infrastructure. There simply wasn't the population density to afford that great expenditure in infrastructure
prepare for the future. This rural community actually is sitting ready to go with a labor force. That's rare. You don't see that. You don't see that in Flagstaff in Coconino County. You don't see that over in Globe. You know, it's an amazing opportunity with the labor force sitting here. And I'm sure everybody has heard of recent, it's the infrastructure, but it's the labor. You hear that across the nation, that is what is happening when it comes to economic development. And really to not take advantage of the opportunity that is afforded, that everybody in this room has paid for, really. It was funded through soft dollars, through federal grant funding, but that was all our tax dollars. And 70% of those kids are leaving every year, versus if they had an actual opportunity here through apprenticeship programs for a livable wage job, where they could just buy a house and have a family. In addition to that, I also wanted to quickly mention too, just quick synopsis of, as I'm really glad Ruth mentioned, the available commercial industrial area in this particular region that everybody's speaking of. Frontier Technicode, I'm sure everybody here is familiar with that business here in Chino Valley. I ran the multiplier effects on them. They were one of our small businesses. And in 2013, they pulled in about $2.3 million in revenue, and they employed about 34 people there. That caused an indirect and induced economic impact of over $1 million of spending in Yavapai County and another 10 jobs. And if you think about the size of Frontier Technicode and what you guys are planning here, that's just one company. And imagine the entrepreneurial growth that can occur further from that. Additionally, I should probably mention that Yavapai College, come fall, we are putting a tech incubator into the CTE campus. So there's going to be entrepreneurial educational services available there. Everybody talks about base industries and those export industries to pull in the dollars. I also like to remind people that there's another side of that equation, and that's import replacement. And there's a lot of major companies in Yavapai County, in the western portion of the county, that are importing a lot of their supply chain from outside the state. What if we had the capacity to go ahead and produce that here? That's even less money that's leaving this town. So just to give you guys a couple more nuances to the whole thing.
If I could just build off of Frontier Technical for a moment. We just heard what that brings into the region. I think statistically, if you look at it, if a business burns, if it catches fire, a lot of those businesses do not rebuild back in that area. And if they are rebuilding during that time, you have lost wages and income for the folks that work there. We have no water infrastructure out there in Frontier Technical at this time. If that place catches on fire, there's absolutely nothing the police fire department can do.
And they're doing very dangerous stuff over there too.
Yeah, I mean, it's extremely dangerous stuff that they're doing in that facility. We're not set up for that. So, you know, to bring in that much water and to be able to get in there and do the things that we have to do. It's the same thing with residential here. Anybody that's on the Prescott water system, there's no guarantee of fire suppression pressures. So we run a tender, big water truck with everything we run, but you may have a hydrant in front of your house. Doesn't mean I'm going to get enough water out of it to fight fire at home. From a business perspective, though, you look at the impact that Frontier Technical has proven to have on the community. Now, have an incident there and lose the facility. That's a huge impact.
And to that point, the ISO ratings have to be very high here. ISO Insurance Services Office that rates communities based on their ability to fight fires and those kinds of situations. And again, going back in the day, deja vu again, Prescott Valley had ISO ratings that are a scale of 0 to 10, was, depending on where you were, it was between 7 and 9. So that means your insurance costs were high. And if you're a commercial business, your insurance costs were even higher. But every resident paid higher homeowner insurance because of that ISO rating. Now, in Prescott Valley, between a 4 and a 5. And that's a direct result of infrastructure as well as improved services by the fire district and able to supply those fire suppression services. But there's more impact than just this economic development. Some, it takes time for these things to happen. Things have to get redone, but it improves other things other than this infrastructure and economic development. It does save money on insurance and those kinds of those kinds of items.
I had two quick things. We discussed in this group the Safeway problem that we had last year. The large businesses that are here have to install a fire storage tank. They have to have pumps. Those pumps have to be maintained. Last year, Safeway's pumps went down. And Safeway called us on the phone and said, can you hook us up to water? We don't want to spend another $90,000 on pumps. And I guarantee you that if we had told them, yeah, it's going to cost you $250 a month though, in order to do that, I guarantee you they would have jumped for that. Rather than make that investment in a dead piece of infrastructure that they know they're going to have to replace again. So the trade-off, really, the commercial may be higher for a time while the tax base is growing, but as the economy strengthens and the tax base grows, those payments begin to glide down. And over 20 years, it doesn't become the same burden that it was when we first started. The other thing that I would say that I think we have an advantage this year with the strategy that's in front of the committee this year is this isn't just Chino Valley saying, hey, we want to put pipes in the ground on 89, let's get out the backhoe. We have relationships now with other organizations that will help ensure that we do this the right way and that will help us succeed. We're talking to the Commerce Authority about bringing businesses here and shopping our facility to the rest of the nation to try and get businesses here. They're thinking about maybe funding an effort for us if we apply and we have the right details all together. We're talking to economic development consultants who do work across the entire state, nationwide project level stuff. We've got the region helping us through GPREP, marketing our region in a specific way to bring businesses here. We've got Prescott Valley EDF, who has helped us a lot. I got to tell you, being able to have conversations with folks who've done it before has been amazing. We've got Yavapai College, we've got NACOG, we've got APS helping us out, and we've got our own chamber. Our businesses are starting to talk to each other about what should we bring here next that will help out all the businesses that are here. I think this is a much more team-based approach this year than just let's get the backhoe out and put water and sewer up and down 89. I think it's a little better thought out and has more opportunities for success because of the number of people and the talent that's being brought to it.
Robert, I think one of the things that you mentioned is that with GPREP, we have just initiated a business action team. And what that is that is representatives from each of the community, the county, the Yavapai Indian tribe, APS is involved, Yavapai College is involved, NACOG is involved, and the chambers are involved. And what we do is we meet on a monthly basis, and we come together to work together, to address the challenges together, to actually create an economic growth impact for the rural footprint here. And it's bringing that experience and bringing the different conversations to the table each month that is going to help each one of our communities to actually grow the entire region. So that we've just had our second meeting and we're moving forward each month. And I think that that's how we can each also tap into the resources that we have, the knowledge that we have to expand each community's needs and economic growth.
So something to keep in mind too, and I think possibly, except for the infrastructure discussion, two of the most important issues were just brought up. Businesses look for infrastructure, but they look for cost-effective labor. Now, it's not just the cheapest labor, it's affordable labor that also has skills. And this region has really improved over the last decade in terms of providing that workforce, and I think it'll continue to improve. And so this is where it gets back to, you can't just look at this plan in isolation. It's, do you trust the plan, and do you trust the other 7 or 8 things that are important for business locations? And I don't have any reason to not trust it at this point based on what I've seen. And the other one has to do with multipliers. And a lot of people know what multipliers are, but they really don't know how they work. And so it's refreshing to hear some, obviously we do. The reason that rural communities don't have as high multipliers as urban communities is that there's 2 things that greatly impact the multipliers. Wages, so higher wage-based sector jobs will have a larger multiplier, which means you have more of the spin-off retail that occurs. but also your ability to supply the business inputs. If you import everything, then your multipliers are going to be low. And I think that, in case people are thinking, no, this isn't going to cause a lot of manufacturing plants to locate here, but there's also opportunities for suppliers of manufacturing plants. And you can take that up to the most extreme level. I mean, has anybody here gone to an Intel store and bought a chip? Intel's a supplier. It's our biggest state base sector company. It's also a supplier to something else. So this chain really is long. And so the supply chain acts like a base sector company for those communities. And so you have an opportunity to locate these companies. You have an opportunity to locate the suppliers, which will be part of the current multiplier, but you can enhance that if a lot of this other stuff comes together. And you can be supplying parts and other things to other companies in other communities. So even though some people say, well, I don't think that we're going to land 3 base sector companies, 3 manufacturing plants over the next 3 or 4 years, which might be needed to pay for a certain amount of infrastructure improvements. But what about some of these other things where you can enhance those multipliers? All those things are real. You guys work on it all the time. How can you improve the supplier network? So those numbers get big really fast. And the last comment I'll make today is, keep in mind that you locate a business 1 year, that business is still paying taxes a second year. So you add that second business a second year. You have 2 net new businesses paying taxes. Well, those 2 are there the 3rd year. Then you add another one that 3rd year. So even if you're only adding 1 or 2 each year, it's a curve. And it's the area under the curve that's really generating the revenue for the community. So it's exponential. It's like growing your interest, the compound formula. That's how the math will work, and so it'll be interesting to see how some of that pencils out. But you have everything in place to start moving that curve up and benefiting from that volume underneath.
Oh, Mr. Mazy. It's been quiet too long, come on.
I look at this from the point of view that we have employment in Chino Valley that is coming from outside the area. Our people here go into town to work, and while they're in town, they spend a lot of money before they come home. 2 things: we need to increase the selection of businesses available so our people in our community will spend their money here, which earns a town sales tax, which pays for all this time and time again. And to bring businesses that Prescott and Prescott Valley do not have here so that we draw business from those areas. I look at my business as a terminal business. People come to Chino Valley for my business to see me. There are similar businesses in Prescott and Prescott Valley, but 1/3 of my business comes from Prescott and Prescott Valley. So I'm doing something to bring their pocket money to Chino Valley, which in turn is spent here at every opportunity. So I don't know what we can do with economic development to bring other unique businesses that we don't have, that they don't have, that we can bring those tax dollars into town. Back when I was president of the Chamber of Commerce, we made numerous attempts to bring industry to the area. One was the Ace Hardware distribution warehouse, and the town council at that time didn't want the trucks on the highway. So we lost all those clean jobs. We brought in a tomato hydroponic plant to build on their facility at Old Home Manor, and they were chased off by the council. So time and time again, we've tried to bring industry here and have been stonewalled by a council who wanted zero growth. Now, I think that has changed now. I think the council, flavor of the council is to promote our community, to grow our community, to make our community stronger. It doesn't do us any good if 90% of the people who live here go to Prescott and Prescott Valley. It does us no good at all. And I know that it's going to be a burden on my business to do this project, tax-wise. We must attempt to make this as fiscally easy on the small businesses that are in this community, to put this together to make it work, to give us this infrastructure. And Robert and I have talked about hookup fees and costs and out of pocket. And for a small business, if you're talking $200 or $300 a month more in taxes, and then you add a burden of $6,000, $8,000, $10,000 worth of out of pocket to hook up to the system, it is absolutely overwhelming. And a lot of the little businesses in this area would not survive that kind of a burden. It would be difficult for us. I think we could do it, but it would be extremely difficult for the rest of us. And these are businesses that have carried this community for the last 20 years. You know, all the sales tax has been collected by mom and pop businesses that have put their homes up, borrowed against their kids' future, took every penny they had and invested it in a small business and hoped to make a living. When I come to Chino Valley, if you didn't bring a business, you didn't have a job. There was no work here. There was no streetlights, there was no McDonald's. Safeway was where Alco was in the small building before it got expanded. There was nothing here. That's why I moved here, but that's because I wanted a safe environment to raise my kids. I took my oldest daughter out of middle school. There was 2,800 kids in the middle school in San Diego. It was horrible for them. They went through mall withdrawals for 2 years because there wasn't anything around. You know, when we had the mail order pennies in Prescott and the Kmart and the little Sears, that was it. And they have taken the bull by the horns and have built a business in Prescott Valley. I couldn't believe what has happened in Prescott Valley in 20 years. To some extent, I'd like to see that here with a controlled growth and
Keyword control.
controlled growth, yes.
Yeah.
But not no growth. We have to grow to survive. I want to see this community be able to pave its roads, for the kids to have good school buses, for the fire systems to work, for everybody to earn a real good wage and enjoy life in our community. I've invested my whole life in this. Everything I got is in this town. And my kids are in town. My kids work for me. They live here in town. I have 10 grandkids. They're not old enough to work yet, but they will. Sooner or later, the oldest one's 15. We're just that far away. We got to make this right for our homes.
Wouldn't more people traveling through create more business, though?
We do. We get a lot of business from Ashford, so
Right,
they
but I
can
mean,
Williams.
and you do, but Chino Valley, I mean, you could, if there's more people in Chino Valley, more people will hopefully coming into the store.
Well, there are. There's 13,000 cars that drive 3 North every day.
Absolutely.
Every day.
Well,
Second
with all-
only to the highway, so.
With all the people that are coming into work in the manufacturers or whatever, all the different things that were mentioned.
We don't make
that's
a big
more
one on
people
manufacturing.
coming into you to get the
Yes,
protection they need.
That's why we have to keep our business here. We have to increase the selection of businesses, broader product selection.
Tax revenue. Good, and the bad, it's program.
They're all talking about
We don't want to be a better community. We need to be a leader in this community. We need to be a driving force that makes people want to drive from Prescott Valley and Prescott to Chino Valley.
Well, if I could jump in really quick, GPREP has a special voice here on that concern, because GPREP is a regional group, but they have done in-depth analysis regarding the economic markets that are here, and they've identified the sweet spots where if we could get people in here, there would be multipliers. If we could get people from this industry sector to locate to our region. So with GPREP's help, and with Ruth and Tracy, and you know, as a team, we can pursue the low-hanging fruit that will give us the most benefit the fastest. And that's why this sort of synergistic approach looks so attractive, because doing that creates all these other spin-off benefits for our community. And I think that's the real beauty of the GeoBond structure now over the way it was last year, is it really does kind of address the root problems in our community and sets them to rights.
And what we're trying to do,
Well, if we don't do this, if we don't go ahead with this plan, what's the scenario? What happens?
Well, if the, let's say the GO bond goes before the voters and fails, maybe. The council can choose to fund any of these things if they wish to through revenue bonds. And it may be the wisest thing to try and do that to provide at least some relief to the community. But you wind up with the downside of the revenue bonds. And in some respects, we're still hamstrung, we're running with a broken leg.
Right, I mean, didn't we do that one, my understanding was we did that once for that Chino Meadows area, and everybody voted on it, and yet they were the only people paying the increases. Was that one of those bonds?
Did they do a bond for that?
It was a revenue bond.
Yeah, it was a revenue bond.
Yeah, well,
It didn't grow, because it can't.
no. So if we don't do the GEO bond, there will be no growth. That's what you're saying.
Well, I think if you do the GEO bond and you put some infrastructure in the ground, you'll see something.
Right.
But we won't have the money, and the systems won't be set so they can continually grow year after year. What you want is, you want a system that's set up to grow, so that when that business does come in, it's a mile down the road and they want water and sewer, you have the ability to run it out there to them so they can do something. And we can't do that right now. Yeah, the recurring revenues.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest problems with the revenue bond is we're gonna hit an $80 a month sewer bill. We're gonna get there either in 17, 18, or 19. If you do all those stuff through revenue bonds, we are heading towards an $80 a month for just sewer alone. How many of you have ever paid $80 a month plus your toilets? It's a lot of money for just one utility, one service. But that's what the revenues have to be in order to support the debt structure, to pay it back. It's just the way that the system has been set up. Right now, we're $58 a month for just sewer alone, just sewer alone. So that's the other downside of the revenue bonds.
Anything else?
I heard you say you made that industry or manufacturing doesn't make any money. You're
No,
right.
there's no sales tax.
It doesn't on the sales tax, yeah.
And that's the only thing this town survives on.
It does.
But it promotes jobs.
But I do believe, Bill, like you said, you bring in a certain amount of your business from out of town. I also have one of those businesses, 90% of what we do is done outside of Chino. So we bring money into town. It's brought into town through wages. So now my employees, though, are now spending the money here, which then the sales tax. So I just didn't want to bash, manufacturing because yes, it's not done at the first tier, but it does.
Sales tax is the town's paycheck each month.
Absolutely.
And you have to have a little bit of both. You got to have a balance, right? Because if you're all residential and you got no local economy, how do you make things?
Oh, but I really think, so, like I said, it's a matter of importing money from outside of Chino Valley into it. All the retail does is just recirculate it. And unfortunately, there's too many businesses. The chains especially are terrible. Mr. Safeway doesn't live here. Mr. Walgreens doesn't live here. Mr. Jack doesn't live here, Jack in the Box. Every month, that money is going out to their stockholders other than here in Chino Valley. So,
But your company, you can choose to use a local accountant if you want to. You can choose to use a local attorney if you want to.
which is then the multiplying aspect of it. Understand?
Anything, Robert?
Nothing else.
Unanswered.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I'd just like to thank all these folks for showing up.
Definitely thanks for your time. After hours, no less.
If that's all you have, the next meeting is Thursday, 5:30 in council chambers. There will be no speakers. It will be the committee kicking it around. See if we can come up with whatever we come up with. So 5:30 council chambers, next meeting. Adjourned.